Welcome to our Wednesday edition of the FLL conference that we're having this week. Today, we are having our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at First session, and our presenter is Annika Pint. Annika is a mechanical engineering graduate and educator who strives to inspire youth, especially girls and young women, to pursue studies and careers in STEM fields. During her time as a classroom and centrally assigned teacher at TDSB, she coached award-winning first LEGO League Challenge teams and supported the curricular integration of coding and robotics in classrooms throughout the school board. She is currently a program manager for First LEGO League Challenge at First Canada, where she continues to support the curricular integration of robotics and the formation of robotic teams at schools in communities across Ontario. She has a lot of experience and wealth to share in this topic, and we're really excited to hear from her. So here's Annika.
Thanks, Mickey. Great to be here. How's my screen sharing looking?
It looks great.
Excellent. So as Mickey mentioned, I'd love to share with you some of the equity, diversity, and inclusion in FIRST initiatives and training that's available for coaches and for students. The two training modules that I'd love to tell you a little bit more about tonight are called Inspiring Success for All. That's the coach and mentor training. And the second one is Inspiring Youth Voice. That's the coach and mentor training. So first knows that culture, shapes our biases and beliefs about people based on their age, gender, race, language, disability, or income level, often without our realization. So the resources that I'm going to share with you in these trainings, they'll actually equip us for this work. FIRST has been collaborating with an organization called the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity, or NAPE for short, and they've developed these trainings for coaches, mentors, volunteers, partners, and other key stakeholders who work directly with students and who are committed to creating diverse, inclusive, and equitable teams. Through these engaging and reflective activities on the power of culture on our interactions with students, these modules equip us with specific strategies to support community outreach, student participation, persistence, engagement, and success. So there's a couple of three-part training modules, as I mentioned, that I'd love to tell you about. The first of which is called Inspiring Success for All, and that's the coach and mentor training module that I mentioned. These are free training modules for coaches, mentors, and volunteers. As I mentioned, it's for those who are working directly with students and who are committed to identifying and removing barriers to the creation and sustainability of diverse, inclusive teams. So the three modules are called Invisible Inequities. The second is Hidden Messages, and the third is Inspiring Success. And we're actually going to work through the first of these three modules together tonight. So I invite you to, at this time, visit bit.ly/inspiring success for all, because in just a couple minutes we'll go through actually the first of these three modules, and you'll be partway towards completion of the entire training, and I'll let you know a little bit about how you can receive some accreditation for having completed all three of those. To give you a bit of a preview, in the first module called Invisible Inequities, coaches and mentors will have an opportunity to reflect on the diversity of their own teams, to take a look at some of the obstacles to improving diversity and why they exist in the first place. Also examining our own unconscious biases and how it can impact recruitment and retention. Learning strategies for successful recruitment and retention, and also setting some SMART goals for improving diversity on our teams. In the second module, which you'll hopefully be inspired to complete on your own, you'll be able to continue the learning by reflecting on the subtle messages that we send with our tone, facial expressions, and words, to take a look at the impact of both negative micro-messaging and also micro-inequities on recruitment, participation, and retention, and how we can shift that to be a more positive micro messaging, or what we call micro affirmations, how that can help improve diversity on teams. And finally, you'll continue to set some SMART goals for improving the diversity on your own teams. And in the third module, you'll have an opportunity to reflect on the factors that can impact self-efficacy among students, examine the positive impact of developing self-efficacy among the students on your team, and take a look at some super strategies for improving self-efficacy among your students, like modeling, implementing short-term goals, and providing descriptive feedback. The other training module that I'd love to let you know about is the Inspiring Youth Voice. And it's for students to let them know about the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion, while providing them with strategies and recommendations to help first create a more inclusive and diverse environment. And so the three modules there are: what are equity, diversity, inclusion, discrimination and bias, and first ED&I Youth Toolkit. And we're hoping that you'll invite all of the youth members of your team to complete this training, and to give you and them a preview of what is involved in each of those modules. We'll take a look at module 1. So what are equity, diversity, and inclusion? This provides a general overview of these concepts and gives examples and scenarios to help students better understand the importance of them on your team. The second module is discrimination and bias, and this gives an overview of the term discrimination, but also helps students recognize and understand and develop ways that they can make first teams more inclusive. And lastly, we've got the first ED&I Youth Toolkit. So this is where students get solutions and suggestions to help them advocate and begin action planning to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion, both on their teams and among the first community. Once you or your students have completed these trainings, we invite you to submit you'll receive a certificate like the one shown here, and we will, if you're able to submit those, then we can send you one of these awesome equity, diversity, and inclusivity badges. So you can send those certificates to communications@firstroboticscanada.org, and we will make sure to get you your equity, diversity, and inclusivity badge. So I'll just mention again, and maybe our lovely and talented workshop moderator might be able to post that in the chat for anyone that's interested in submitting their certificates in exchange for one of these awesome badges. Okay, so before I share with you some of the other resources that are available, I would love to take a look at that first module that I mentioned. You decide to complete, if you put in the link that I mentioned, bit.ly/inspiring success for all, it should bring you to this website where you can choose which of the three modules you'd like to complete. So let's take a look at module 1, invisible inequities, and a reminder that this is the coach and mentor training, but that there's also a companion training for youth on your team.
So Annika, I just wanted to point out to people that on the previous page, the sign up, the thing where you can put your email in, that was on the right.
Yeah.
It means if you have to stop your training in the middle of it or whatever, if you put your name and your email in there, it means you can go back to it later.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's a great way to give yourself a reminder to complete that training if you have to interrupt for any reason, which we all know lots of those come up, right? Thanks, Mickey. So as an introduction to the first module, it provides an overview similar to the one that I already mentioned about what to expect during the session. And we'll scroll through these. And again, if you're completing this along with me, you'll be invited to answer some questions and do some matching in some of the different activities throughout this module. So let's go through it together. Let's check out this first video.
So the mission of FIRST is really about inspiring the next generation of STEM professionals through mentor-based youth development programs. And one of the things that equity allows us to do is to understand who is currently accessing our programs and who isn't accessing our programs. Our young people are ready. They're excited, they're energetic, they are innovative in ways that we sometimes don't think of. And so I think that the more that we can put opportunities in front of them, engaging experiences in their hands, they'll grab hold to them and they'll flourish. Whether we know it or not, they're looking for us to answer questions like, do I belong here? Am I safe here? Do people see me? And so it's important for all of our young people to have that sense of belonging and acceptance. I heard loud and clear from some of the girls that we are not here just to grab food for the boys. We are here to learn some of these 21st century skills. To the degree that a coach or a mentor is being watchful that that's not happening, that's going to be important for us.
Thank you, Shelley. So let's go on to the next section.
These FIRST coaches, mentors, and participants want to tell you about their experiences. Click each person to learn about the challenges they're currently facing.
So I love these modules because they're so interactive. This first coach, wonders why she can't get more diversity on her team. And she herself is an engineer and loves it, so isn't really sure what to do. Let's check out the opinions of a couple of the other coaches. There's a word there, giving everyone equal opportunities. That comes up a little bit later in this module, so watch out for that one. Yeah, that can be frustrating. And let's see.
You bring up some really good points that are fairly common.
Yeah, and we all demonstrate the core values, and we talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, but these are some real life scenarios that coaches and participants are facing on teams. So again, so grateful to folks that are willing to take this training to become more aware of and potentially take action to help improve this equity, diversity, inclusion on their teams.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see what's next.
When you think about getting more people involved in FIRST, your first instinct might be to focus on giving everyone an equal opportunity to succeed. You want to support everyone equally, right? That's the premise of equality. If we give everyone access to the same experiences and resources, then they should all be equally successful. However, what happens if people face different obstacles? Unless everyone starts from the same point, giving them the same thing maintains the inequality that already exists. What's the alternative? Instead of focusing on equality, let's focus on equity. An equity approach takes existing disparities into consideration. We can work to give students what they need to address those disparities. For example, students from financially insecure homes might have more challenges getting transportation to FIRST meetings and events. Those students might need additional support to be able to participate consistently. Helping students with alternate transportation arrangements is working toward equity rather than equality. Another strategy is holding team meetings at the school before or after school. Although this may still create inequity depending on available busing, the transportation challenges faced in the U.S. may be different than the transportation challenges faced in other places across the world.
Yeah, I just wanted to take us back to this one graphic here, because the common misconception is that maybe this fellow that's on, or this person that's on the two risers, or this person who has their own laptop. There's a common misconception, or sometimes people may wonder, oh, why are they getting special treatment or different treatment? And again, there are systemic barriers in place that make it that make access to opportunities unequal. And so not everybody is necessarily starting at the same place. And so to give everyone an even playing field, we actually need to provide some additional resources and supports that not everyone may need in order to be able to access resources and participate in programs.
About 50% of the general population is female. How do you think the demographics of first participants compare to the general population? It's okay if you don't know the exact answer. Estimates are fine.
And I know that this is using US data, and despite the conception or perception that maybe Canada is much different, I think a lot of the data is similar for Canada. So Mickey, any guesses on what the participation is in You First?
I want to say 45, but I recognize that's probably being too biased about how wonderful we are, so
Yeah.
probably 30%.
Okay, let's check it out. Good guess. Yeah, so it's only about 30%. And
so that's only 3 girls in 10.
Yeah, any guesses on why that might be?
I find that, especially with the younger generations, I think the generation that's growing up now will grow up with different things, but it always used to be like the messaging that we got from the media was always, here's a magazine with like trucks on it and let's give that to the boy, and here's a magazine for girls and it's Cosmo or whatever. And yes, this is going back to like when we were really into magazines as kids. So it's just like those kind of like small like subliminal messaging of what you grew up with. I think there's that. But we also have to recognize that women weren't in these STEM fields for a very long time. And so we're slowly changing that. And 30%, if you said 30%, maybe even like 40 years ago, that would have been a lot. So I think we are making grounds there, but we have a long way to go.
Agreed. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective about that. And as a female in a STEM field, I know that you have a lot of experience with this, so I may check in with you again.
Consider the racial and ethnic makeup of the United States or your country as a whole. How do you think this compares to first participants? What groups would you expect are overrepresented? What groups would you guess are underrepresented? We know that FIRST is not currently reaching all youth. Generally, white and Asian students are heavily represented in FIRST in the U.S. compared to the overall population, while Black, Hispanic, and Native American students are underrepresented. These statistics vary widely by state, and outside the U.S., the racial and ethnic breakdown may look very different. Some teams closely reflect the demographics of their communities, while others display very different demographics. It's important to look at your own community and neighboring communities when working toward inclusion. Who has access to FIRST?
Yeah, and I think we can safely say that compared to the general population, there's a similar underrepresentation, for example, among members of the Black community on FIRST teams and other racial groups, but also members of the LGBTQ plus community. And as we saw earlier, the percentage of females in the general population is probably close to 50%, but only about 30% participation in FIRST teams.
You may experience obstacles to improving diversity in your team. Not all of those obstacles are within your control, but you can control your response to those obstacles. Here are some instinctive responses people may have when reflecting on the lack of diversity in their team. These are natural responses, but they limit the ability to improve diversity in both recruitment and retention because they deflect responsibility. These quotes are excerpts or paraphrased from interviews and focus groups with coaches and mentors.
Yeah, and Mickey, earlier when you mentioned some of the quotes that some of the coaches and team members made, they were pretty reflective or representative of what some folks experience on teams. And these are some, as they mentioned, some similar type comments that are taken from members of the FIRST community when they're talking about some of these inequities that they notice.
Yeah, it's really great how they're taking things that they see within the community and pointing out the holes in it.
Yeah, it starts with awareness, right? And you know, maybe people aren't aware that these things are going on, or that these are concerns for people. So as it mentions here, keeping these responses in mind as you reflect on your own team throughout the module. And there may be some discomfort associated with making those types of reflections, and that's okay. But that discomfort, as they say here, it invites us to consider our own experiences and assumptions, and to learn and grow. Really, that's where the learning and the growth happens. So let's see what else is in store.
Think about how your team or teams reflect your community. What is the ratio of males and females on your team? In the general population, the ratio is approximately 1 to 1.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that you could complete on your own based on the composition of your own team, if you're following along and completing this module as you go.
Think about the demographics of your local community and your team. Does your team reflect your community? For purposes of this activity, you don't need the exact percentages. You may look up your community statistics in the links provided in the resources list, or simply estimate. Note that these are U.S. demographic categories. If these categories aren't relevant to your location, then think about what groups are present in your community and team. Your answers are private and will not be seen by anyone.
Yeah, so this is just for self-reflection.
How and where do you currently think about the demographic?
Again, just if you're interested in taking a look at the representation in your community as a whole, and how does that compare with that on your team, and is that something that you'd like to match up? And if they don't currently match up, we can take a look at some of the strategies and approaches that you may want to take in order for them to do so.
I think this is really great because it means you
participants.
Sorry, Michaela, go for it.
I think this is really great because it means you actually have to sit back and count and then do a normalization to see if it is representative. So it actually makes you think about it. So I think that is a really good exercise to do.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, some teams may be reflective of their communities. Maybe you live in a community where there isn't a high proportion of members of the Black community, or and so you know, not having a proportional representation on your team is, you know, makes sense. But again, we want to take a look at providing opportunities for those that may not have it if they are within your community.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and so these are some of the strategies that teams may, or coaches and teams may take in terms of recruiting their participants. There are lots of different strategies and locations that you can try that may be different from the ones that you've tried before, and maybe give you some ideas on how you can reach some more diverse members.
One area of focus for increasing equitable involvement in FIRST is through recruitment. After all, this is the first step. If we don't get everyone involved from the start, our actions won't have as much impact on retention or other areas. Some FIRST coaches and mentors have shared their strategies for successful recruitment of students from underrepresented groups. The first strategy is meeting people where they already are. This may include recruiting in non-technical classes rather than just math and science classes. Your own personal community may not match the demographics of the student community. A second strategy that works for many coaches and mentors is communicating with parents and families about the value of FIRST. This is especially important for younger students. Some families may think that FIRST is only for certain types of people: white, male, nerds, honor students, joiners, those who already know about tools and robots, and so on. Be open to their perspectives and listen to what they say. Actively reach out to families. Don't assume that people will come to you. Here's how one mentor uses these strategies together to attract diverse participants.
Yeah, these are some good strategies, and we're going to, continue through this at a little bit of a faster pace than we would normally invite folks to complete these modules. I think each one is meant to take about an hour so that you have some time for reflection and maybe some of that research that's required. But let's take a
Read the
look at
following
some of these
scenario.
strategies.
Choose the best 2 recruitment strategies to increase diversity on the team.
So let's check out this scenario. Natasha coaches 3 First Leg League teams out of a charter school in Boston. And here are the demographics: approximately 40% Russian, 20% Latino or Latina, 20% Portuguese, and 20% African American. But the FLL team is entirely Russian with 1 African American student. So any suggestions on what Natasha could do to recruit some underrepresented students from the school?
Well, I would definitely work with teachers at the school to help translate the information, because if they can't read it, they can't do anything, which isn't fair.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think parent-teacher night would be a good way to seek out different community groups.
Mm-hmm. Let's check it out. Ta-da!
We did it!
Yay! So, and as they mentioned here, even having some interpreters for the parent-teacher night, in case English isn't the primary language spoken. But thanks for your help, Michaela.
The inequities that prevent students from participating in FIRST might be invisible. Some students may not be on the team because of obstacles, such as the inability to pay the fees or find transportation. Some girls may think that only boys can program. Black and Latino students may feel insecure or unwelcome on teams where everyone else is white. Some students don't see themselves as being allowed to be on the team and work on the robot because of their own perceived barriers on race, gender, sexuality, or other factors. However, these obstacles don't mean that coaches, mentors, or other participants are deliberately trying to exclude anyone. In fact, sometimes people actively try to recruit from underrepresented groups without realizing how their actions inadvertently create inequity. Even when people recognize and want to fix a problem, it isn't always easy. Sometimes it's difficult to even know where to start. That's our goal here, to provide you with steps you can take to remove obstacles and increase your reach through FIRST. Working together, we can give more students opportunities and open their eyes to new possibilities.
Yeah, I'm glad they mentioned this, because we know that no coaches or mentors would be intentionally discriminating against different populations of students. But in some cases, you don't recognize that it's a problem, and once you do, you're not really sure what to do. So again, these training modules are a great place to start. Let's see what's next.
Let's take a step back and look at how obstacles and inequities develop. A number of mutually reinforcing factors are at play. The cycle starts with stereotypes, the belief held within our culture about characteristics, behaviors, and social norms. Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie explains, the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. For example, a global stereotype is that females are not good at technology, or a U.S. stereotype is that Asians are better at math and science. These stereotypes lead to biases that we're often unaware of and may be inconsistent with our stated beliefs. If the cultural stereotype says females aren't good at technology, then a coach or mentor might unconsciously perceive boys as better at building. Biases can be explicit or implicit. Implicit biases are challenging because they're invisible, and we're often unaware of these hidden associations. Even when bias isn't immediately obvious, it can cause people to send micro-messages. Micro-messages are small, subtle, unconscious messages we send and receive, often without saying a word. Looks, gestures, and tone of voice can all communicate micro-messages. Having all males on the drive team and all females in marketing sends micro-messages about what roles are appropriate. Over time, micro-messages build up. Positive micromessages accumulate to create subtle advantages, and negative micromessages accumulate to create disadvantage. We'll talk more about micromessages in the second module, Hidden Messages. A female student might lack confidence in programming, partly because micromessages have put her at a disadvantage. That's self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to accomplish a task. Self-efficacy also affects behavior. If a student doesn't believe she can successfully drive the robot, then she may not even try. We'll explore strategies to improve self-efficacy in the third module, Inspiring Success.
Yeah, I really like this graphic because it shows how one thing can lead to another, and it's almost like a vicious cycle that we can break by continuing the learning.
Imagine you're helping your team build the robot. You have a power tool ready. Picture in your mind the perfect student to use that power tool. What does that student look like? What characteristics does that perfect student have? When you pictured that student holding a power tool, did you imagine a male student or a female one? What race or ethnicity did you picture? Think about that mental image as you complete the next reflection activity. Stereotypes come from the broader culture, so they can be found everywhere. What stereotypes have you witnessed yourself within FIRST? Think about stereotypes for multiple dimensions of student identity: gender, race and ethnicity, LGBTQ+, socioeconomic status, ability and disability, or other areas. Stereotypes might be negative, like a particular group of people isn't good at technical work, or positive, like a group of people is good at math.
Yeah, Michaela, I don't know if you've had any experiences or where you've witnessed stereotypes in FIRST, but this can be a really confronting and uncomfortable answer to give, right? Because it may be something that you've seen that that went unresolved, and that was uncomfortable at the time, but you weren't really sure what to do, and wondering if you've ever witnessed anything like this.
Some of the things I've witnessed is so the stereotype that they mentioned where Asian people are very smart, and also another one that they didn't mention was often they assume that the guys are very strong, so they want them to lift the robot instead of some of the guys aren't very strong, and sometimes the girls are stronger, and that's just how it goes. But because I think that hurts both ways, right? Because you are hurting guys in the sense that they're not always strong and not giving the opportunity to girls.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable too, because as someone who's, I would say, maybe relatively strong and can lift stuff, you also, sometimes people are trying to be polite or helpful, right? So if a male student or a male coach came along and said, oh, like, let me help that with you, it's sometimes awkward to be like, yeah, no, I got this, and it can be perceived as like, I don't know, bossy, or trying to be like super independent. But yeah, and so again, throughout the module, there's some strategies recommended on how you can navigate scenarios like that. Thanks for the suggestion.
I always like the one where I'm carrying something and someone offers to help, and I'm like, well, actually, could you get the door?
Oh, I like that one. I like that one. So it's like including everyone, but in ways that they might not have expected.
Yeah.
Love it.
Think about how stereotypes might be reflected in recruitment. Do you avoid recruiting LGBTQ+ students or those with disabilities? Do you provide any accommodations such as interpreters or meeting in accessible rooms? Do you only recruit students of one ethnicity or background if they're in advanced or honors STEM courses? Are there any differences in how you recruit from different groups? When you recruit, do you talk to females primarily about presentation or marketing roles? Do you ask males whether they've programmed or worked with tools? Asking different recruitment questions of males and females may reflect stereotypes about what kinds of roles are appropriate for different people. In fact, inequities in roles are a concern raised by many coaches and mentors in our interviews and focus groups. Think back to who you pictured as the perfect student to handle a tool. Some mentors are more likely to hand a power tool to a male student than a female one. Female participants often end up in less technical roles, and male participants in fewer marketing roles, even though some male participants are fantastic at marketing and some female students are terrific at designing and building. One cultural stereotype says that women are more nurturing, so women and girls in FIRST are more likely to be in charge of providing food during club meetings. Because of stereotypes, Asian participants in the U.S. may be more likely to do coding, which may be reflected in both recruiting and the roles performed. Students with disabilities may be able to successfully perform particular roles, at least with accommodation, though they may not even be asked to join if people perceive them as incapable.
It's great. It's great. They're laying it all out there, so you have to talk about it.
Yep. That's where sometimes the discomfort comes, right? Is acknowledging that they exist.
We all have implicit biases, thoughts and feelings that are outside of our conscious control. Biases are a natural part of how our brains detect patterns and make quick decisions. Biases can be helpful in guiding our intuition, but they can also cause exclusion if we're not aware of them. Biases are most harmful when they're backed up by the power to affect opportunity. Because these biases are hidden, you may be inadvertently restricting opportunities without realizing it. Becoming aware of hidden biases can help you use your power in FIRST to increase opportunities. The Implicit Association Test, or IAT, asks you to sort words and images into categories quickly and without pausing to think. It measures the speed of your reaction to uncover unconscious influences on your associations. The test measures the strength of your associations between groups of people, such as women, black people, or LGBTQ+ people, and qualities or characteristics, such as good, bad, smart, athletic, or criminal. People with an unconscious bias against a group will be slower to associate positive words and concepts with that group. Although you don't need to take the test now, a link and directions to the Implicit Association Test can be found in resources. In the discussion forum question following this module, you'll be asked to complete one of these tests and reflect on your results.
Yeah. Have you ever taken one of those implicit bias tests, Michaela?
I actually have not had that opportunity, or I haven't made it for myself, so I should change that.
Yeah, check it out in the resources or references at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what's next. How the bias affects recruitment.
Bias can affect recruitment in FIRST. Bias and stereotypes work in multiple ways. They may affect how you perceive and recruit participants, but they may also affect how potential members see your team. If females see only males on the team, it may confirm a preconceived notion that they aren't welcome or aren't good enough to join. If Latino and Latina students see only white students on a team or in technical roles, they may believe that they don't belong in FIRST or working on robots. This issue can occur in any team, in any location. Students from underrepresented groups may interpret that underrepresentation is an indication that they don't belong. One technique for reducing the impact of bias is becoming aware of how biases might be reflected in your recruitment strategy. Do you ever think that someone is the wrong kind of person to join your team? If so, does that come from you or from the other person? Do you assume that certain groups of people aren't interested in joining your team? Is it possible that there are assumptions built into how you recruit and work with students that don't take into account all cultures and situations? Are there invisible inequities that affect how you perceive potential participants or how those students perceive FIRST?
Yeah. So next up, we've got a couple of different recruitment strategies that might help eliminate some of the biases associated with recruitment.
Consider these recruitment strategies. Who might be inadvertently excluded? Drag each group to a recruitment strategy that might not fully include them.
All right,
Okay,
we'll
let's do
try one.
uh,
I think this one looks sort of. We may need to match them all up before we can check. Help me out.
what is SES students?
Socioeconomic status.
Okay. So are these, oh, that might not fully include them? Oh, sorry, I was thinking the other way, and I was, okay, yes. Then
I'm working it. I'm working it here.
I did not contribute at all, but you did great.
Thanks, Michaela.
I just didn't read the not
a
part.
mentor's recruiting process. Is it possible this process reflects hidden bias? If so, how?
And again, if you're completing this on your own, this is an opportunity where you can pause and take some time to reflect on how, you know, how this mentor could be, you know, how his biases could be impacting the recruitment process.
Yes, be more inclusive when recruiting.
So there's they give some feedback there regardless of your response. A couple of things to think about. So, you know, pause and read, or you're maybe completing this on your own, so you can do that on your own time.
They definitely have some good points in that blurb, so I recommend.
Robo Leon is a highly successful first tech challenge team. This is the team that everyone wants to work with at competition. The team reflects the diversity of its community. A Latina female is on the build team, and a Black gay male is programming. Equal numbers of females and males are on the team overall and in the technical and marketing subgroups. The mentors actively recruited in multiple places to ensure that they were reaching as many people as possible. They brought the robot to some science classrooms, spoke to English and art classes, and visited a neighborhood association gathering. Over several years, the team's diversity and success has increased. Having a diverse team makes it easier to recruit and retain diverse members. What started with just a few people has expanded over time. All team members, including mentors and volunteers, tried every role. Trying new skills pushed some people out of their comfort zones. Their programmer, for example, previously viewed himself as an artist rather than a technical person. He was initially skeptical, but he discovered a new passion for programming. One of the mentors was initially most comfortable using his hands and building, but he surprised himself by having fun sketching t-shirt designs. Because the team members come from so many different backgrounds and bring different experiences and skills, they've earned a reputation for innovative solutions. They've been more successful at competition because of their efforts to include everyone. They're a perfect example of how increased diversity leads to better solutions. The team embodies the mission of FIRST by increasing inspiration and recognition of science and technology within the team and their community. This is the vision we have for your team and every team within FIRST.
It is possible, and there's actually another workshop session taking place tonight. There's a First Lego League coach, and it sounds as though many of the strategies they've mentioned here are things that she's implemented in her own school and community to also help create a really diverse and inclusive team. So if hoping folks will check out the recording of that session as well for some other great ideas.
Oh, that sounds so great, because it means that she's taken ideas that we've seen here and actually seen how they can be brought about in actual practice.
Absolutely, it is possible.
Let's take a few moments to review what we've discussed so far. We've
Talk to me, Mickey.
I was about to say, anything's possible if you put your mind to it.
It's true. If you think teams can build an FRC robot in 6 weeks, then I'm sure they can increase the equity, diversity, and inclusion on their team.
Talked about invisible causes of inequities, including stereotypes and hidden biases. Stereotypes are the beliefs about a group of people that come from the broader culture. These stereotypes cause bias, which may influence our behavior in subtle ways, even without us being aware of it. We addressed stereotypes and bias within the larger context of the culture wheel. In the second module, we'll dig deeper into micro-messages and how they create or remove barriers. The third module focuses on strategies for improving self-efficacy or the belief in your ability to complete a task. These modules will give you more ideas for recruitment as well as strategies for improving equity in roles and retention. We focused primarily on recruitment in this module, sharing 2 proven strategies for helping your team reflect the demographics of your community. The first strategy is to recruit where people are. You may need to recruit from multiple places: science classes, art classes, community centers, club days, or other options to intentionally target underrepresented groups. The second strategy is to talk to parents and families about the importance of FIRST. On the next few pages, you'll set a goal for yourself about recruitment and create a plan for your first action.
Yeah, and this is where...
What is your goal for recruitment? You may use the example goals here as inspiration. We'll get more specific with this goal in the next few pages.
Yeah, and this will be specific to your team and your circumstances. But there's some examples there from that can help folks get started.
Planning the specifics of where and how you'll work toward meeting that goal increases your odds of success. In what situation or time and place will you take action toward meeting your goal? For example, if your goal is to increase female participation, the situation might be during the 1-month period when you recruit before the season starts.
What were you going to say there, Mickey?
I think this is really good to put specific goals down on a page because it's great to learn about it. But if you don't have anything to work towards, it might just get lost in the busyness of running a team.
Yeah, and it's like kind of having some accountability and consolidating the learning, right, as opposed to just watching and kind of ticking the boxes. So I'm not sure if they mention it in this module, but they talk about SMART goals, which is the acronym specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So those are some great things to include in the goals to make them more likely to be achievable.
That is excellent.
Let's see if they might mention it.
When you get to the situation you identified in the last step, what action will you take? Be as specific as possible. Continuing the previous example, to recruit more females in a 1-month period, you might choose the action of visiting 2 language arts classes in addition to your usual science and math classes. It's okay if the action you list now is only a small part of your total solution. In fact, with complex problems such as this one, it's better to break the action down into manageable chunks. You can follow this same process in the future for your later actions and goals.
Yeah, and again, not to say that language arts classes are full of girls, but that's one strategy that people could try for recruitment. Let's check out some next steps.
Congratulations! You have completed this module. The next step is to join the conversation in the discussion board. This will give you the opportunity to complete an implicit association test. If you haven't already, reflect on what you've learned and share strategies with other coaches, mentors, colleagues, and volunteers. Directions to access the discussion board can be found via the resources link at the top. You can also download a handout with all of the resources and strategies from this module. This PDF can serve as a resource as you work on increasing access and participation in FIRST.
Awesome.
We did it!
Yay! So again, I get that was, took a bit of time, but hoping that folks learned something from walking through the different activities in the first module, and that might inspire you to complete the second and third ones as well. Just before we wrap up today, I wanted to mention that on the FIRST website, there are a whole bunch of other resources, not only opportunity to access the coach and mentor trainings and the youth team member trainings, but there are some other resources in each of those. And I wanted to mention one in particular to close that's from the disability inclusion resource section. And it's, again, a very short video about the power of language. Which is something, sort of a small actionable item or task that folks can take to really start changing the culture on their teams and in their communities. So let's check this one out together, and then we'll wrap up for the session.
Why are the words we choose so important? Well, words convey meaning. The words we use reflect our values and our beliefs. That means words not only have a dictionary definition, but they also have social significance. The tricky thing about words is that their social meaning can change. When it comes to the words used to describe disability, we can put these changes in action. Let's take the term mental retardation, for example. This used to be a diagnostic term. If a child's IQ was below a specific level, they would be diagnosed as mentally retarded. But the word retarded started being used as an insult socially. People with disabilities advocated for the medical term to change because of how the word was used socially. You may have seen a campaign in recent years to get people to stop using the R word in their daily language. Through these advocacy efforts, the language has changed. The medical term is now intellectual disability. With the social meaning of words changing over time, how do you know what to say when talking to a youth with a disability or their family about a disability? That's where socially responsible language comes in. Socially responsible language is all about learning the preferences of the youth and family and using that as your guide. Two types of socially responsible language are person-first language and identity-first language. Person-first language is putting the person before the disability. Instead of saying the disabled child, you would say the child with a disability. Identity-first language communicates that disability is a vital part of someone's identity. For example, someone might say, I am autistic, instead of I'm a person with autism. Identity-first language places value on the disability, and it mirrors how people talk about other kinds of characteristics. It would be awkward to say, I'm a person with brown eyes. You would simply say, I have brown eyes. Whichever type of socially responsible language someone may use, you can mirror it. This indicates you value their preferences and recognize they have a say in how their disability is addressed. So now we talked about two different types of language. What do you do when a non-disabled youth asks you questions about another youth's disability? It's always important to protect confidentiality. A diagnosis is protected information and should not be shared with others unless a family or youth has given their permission. If a youth asks why a peer with a disability acts a certain way, you can answer respectfully without breaking confidentiality. You might say something like, Quentin rocks when it gets too loud in the gym. What do you do when something is too loud? Would you like to bring him his headphones? That would help him feel better. This kind of conversation protects confidentiality, helps the peer relate to Quentin, and teaches the peer a concrete thing he can do to support inclusion. Depending on their age, the youth with a disability may want to answer questions themselves. Check with the youth ahead of time about how comfortable they are talking about their disability or answering their peers' questions. Remember, the words we choose are important. When you practice socially responsible language, you are supporting inclusion.
I think that's a really great video that addresses something that I actually try to work really hard on. And it's not just even with people with disabilities, it's people that you talk to generally. So for me, I never say kids on a team. I always say students. And that's just because it gives them a level up of like, you're a student and I have higher expectations for you, and they should have higher expectations for themselves. Maybe that's not the best way to look at it, but I just want to respect them a bit more.
Yeah, it's a great example, Mickey, and that you know they mentioned in this video the use of the word retarded is not is derogatory and it shouldn't be used anymore, and although not maybe not as extreme, but there are other examples of let's call them commonly used phrases like calling a group of women guys. Hey guys, that's a commonly used term, but there are implications associated with using that term. And there are also many other common words and phrases that are steeped in racism and that ought to be removed from folks' vocabulary. And yes, you need to be a little bit more deliberate and thoughtful with your words, and it's going to have a really big impact on who feels welcome and who feels included. So we'll be sharing this slideshow with folks after today's session, and so you can check out these links if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the impact of different types of words or phrases on different communities or populations of people.
Yeah, this is great.
Awesome. So we'll wrap things up for tonight, and I'll just leave my contact information there in case anyone has questions about accessing the training or any of the other equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives that are going on at First. So thank you so much for having me, and look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Well, thank you for joining us and creating this fantastic presentation. It's super educational, and I've learned a lot.
Thanks, Mickey. Have a great night.
You too.